I'm Madison Cleaver with the Oklahoman, and I'm here with Kim Teehee from the Cherokee Nation. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
And we are going to be discussing the historic confirmation of Deb Haaland as the Secretary of Interior going on in Washington, D.C. right now. So, Kim, can you just tell me a little bit about the significance of a Native person, let alone a Native woman, being in this position that oversees the Bureau of Indian Affairs?
Absolutely. First of all, Native Americans have never had anyone in the federal government serve as a cabinet secretary before. That is absolutely significant. I was blessed to have been a first in the Obama administration as the top senior advisor for policy on Native American affairs, but never before a cabinet secretary. So that is absolutely historic. And Deb Haaland actually has had a couple of firsts. She was one of the first Native American women to serve in the Congress, and now she's again breaking the glass ceiling with this historic confirmation. And it means the world to Native Americans because for so long, our community has been marginalized. We often are not included just in the basic data about America because we're such a small constituency. And so to have a Native American serve at the highest level of government as a cabinet secretary tells Native Americans, tells the young people of this country who are Native American, boys and girls, that you can achieve the highest level of government through your hard work. And so we're very excited to have Congresswoman Haaland being considered for Interior Secretary.
Can you talk about maybe the history of the relationship between the Department of Interior and the Cherokee Nation or Native nations in general?
Absolutely. So, not everyone learns about the history of Indian tribes while they're in school. But what we do know collectively, at least I think it's common knowledge, is the unfortunate history of forced removal, the negative policies that were designed to undermine the governments of tribes. And oftentimes when those policies were implemented by the federal government, it was often the Interior Secretary that was tasked with implementing those devastating policies at times, the very agency that is supposed to look after the Indian tribes and supposed to oversee the trust relationship between the Indian tribes and the federal government. And, one of those policies used to be to terminate Indian tribes, to terminate their recognition. And Congresswoman Haaland, when she accepted her nomination, made reference to that she is living proof that the policies that department, the Interior Department once sought to pursue to terminate the recognition of tribes, that she's living proof of that failed policy. And I'm so glad that is failed policy because I think as we see here in Oklahoma, tribes are vibrant cultures, vibrant governments that contribute greatly to this state.
We have heard some say she is a contentious nominee. Some Republicans have said or criticized maybe her outlook on fossil fuel production. What would you say to people that may say she's not right for the job?
First of all, I would say look at who introduced her when she was at the first day of hearings yesterday. Congressman Don Young from Alaska, the elder member of Congress is from Alaska, who is known for his conservative views, who has worked tirelessly with Congresswoman Haaland on a bipartisan basis to get things done. And that Congresswoman Haaland has a record of being the most bipartisan member of Congress in her freshman year, meaning she introduced, for every bill she introduced, she had a Republican sponsor to help her get the bill through the finish line. And so I think she made very clear yesterday that the views that she held as a Congresswoman representing her district in New Mexico are not necessarily the views of President Biden. She will be advancing his agenda. And what we know about Congresswoman Haaland is that she is known to work on a bipartisan basis, to work across partisan divides, to pull in stakeholders. And we know that the Interior Department includes the Westerners, the hunters, the fishers, the ranchers. All of those, by the way, are in her family and in her DNA as well. So I think that we're going to see somebody who is unlike previous secretaries because, she's authentic too. She's not been a career politician. She likes to get things done. And so she's a solution seeker, and that's been reflected in her current record as a Congresswoman.
And you touched on this a second ago, but with you potentially joining Congress and, Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids elected in 2018, what does that say about, what do you think people think whenever they see Native women, taking over these roles? Do you think that speaks to people in what way?
Oh, well, I love it because, Cherokee Nation, we're a matrilineal society. So we are accustomed to having strong women in key positions. But what I think it says is that we finally have a legislative branch of this country that reflects the true diversity of the United States. We had that it includes people of different ethnicities, different genders, and I don't know a time when this Congress was as diverse as it is today. And so I think what it says also is to our young women and young men who are watching this play out before them, that they will have been exposed to a more diverse Congress than I was when I was growing up and a little kid. And when you see yourself reflected in the governing body of either state government or federal government, it says something to you. It says that you can achieve those things as well. You can see yourself in those positions too. And so I think it's a remarkable time.
I just want to pivot to you a little bit. For those that may be, unfamiliar with the Treaty of New Echota, can you just maybe talk about that and how you play into what's going on there?
Sure, thank you. So the 1835 Treaty of New Echota is actually Cherokee Nation's removal treaty. That's the treaty that was signed by an illegal faction that led to the forced removal of the Cherokee Nation from the east to modern day Oklahoma, where we lost a quarter of our population. Included in that treaty is an article that expressly states that Cherokee Nation shall have a delegate in the U.S. House of Representatives whenever Congress makes provision for the same. That treaty provision is still valid. It's never been voided. And in fact, we had a federal court decision just a few years ago that looked at another treaty. In looking at another treaty, the court said, you know what, those treaties' rights are valid. And what Chief Hoskin thought at the time was that if Cherokee Nation has to honor the treaty obligations reflected in those treaties, so should the United States. And our treaties were ratified by the Senate and they were signed by the President of the United States. And so we're hopeful that this session that we will get the support that we need in order to seat the delegate. And we're hopeful too that Congresswoman Haaland, who was so supportive of this delegate position last year, obviously COVID interrupted our momentum that we had going into last year, but we're going to add it again. And so, my hope is that we will continue to have her support in the administration, and that we will continue to have the support of the House members, and that this seat will be finally, and this treaty right will be finally fulfilled.
Great. Thank you so much for talking with me. This is such an important topic and so timely right now. So I really appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Addison.